Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
Our neighborhood, Oakwood Estates, used to be the kind of place where kids played street hockey until dusk, and people actually waved when you drove by. Front yards were meticulously kept, houses painted in shades of beige and muted gray, and the annual summer barbecue at the community park was always the highlight of the year. We all had our little gripes with the Homeowners Association. Sure, the annual fee hike, the bizarre obsession with specific mailbox designs, the way they'd send out stern letters about overgrown rose bushes, but it was all pretty standard suburban bureaucracy. Annoying, but harmless. Then came the new parking rules. It started innocently enough, a single line in a multi-page email newsletter that usually went straight to my junk folder. Updated parking enforcement policy. The subject read. I skimmed it, saw something about enhanced community safety and clarified regulations. My eyes glazed over. Big mistake. A colossal, life-altering mistake, as it turned out. The first real sign that something was seriously wrong hit me like a brick on a Tuesday morning. I woke up, groggy, planning my usual coffee run, and glanced out the kitchen window. My neighbor, Maria, was standing on her driveway, hands on her hips, staring at an empty spot where her beat-up but reliable minivan usually sat. Her face was a mask of utter bewilderment, then pure disbelief. She walked around in slow circles, checking every angle, as if the van might have simply materialized behind the hedges. I knew that minivan. It was her lifeblood, how she got her 3 kids to school and her elderly mother to appointments. My stomach twisted into a knot. I went outside, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Maria, everything all right? I asked, though the answer was pretty obvious. She turned to me, her voice trembling. It's gone. My van. It was right here. I swear it was. Did someone steal it? Her eyes were wide with a desperate kind of fear. Just then, David from across the street jogged over, still in his pajamas, holding his phone. Did you guys see what happened to Sophia's car? And the Johnson's SUV? Both gone, and they're usually parked perfectly. David, bless his heart, was the neighborhood gossip king. But right then, his tone was laced with genuine concern. That's when the first whispers started. Not of theft, but of towing. Someone recalled seeing a sleek, black tow truck, not the usual rust bucket local ones, late last night. Another neighbor mentioned a strange new company name on a sign at the entrance to the visitor parking lot, Precision Towing Solutions. The name itself sounded clinical, cold, like something out of a corporate memo. The calls started flooding into the HOA office, but nobody was answering. It was like they vanished into thin air. Maria eventually got through to a number scrawled on a tiny, almost invisible sticker on a lamppost near the park. Her face went from worried to horrified as she listened. $300? She shrieked into the phone, her voice cracking. For what? It was in my own driveway. Turns out, the new rules weren't just clarified, they were weaponized. Maria's front tire, a mere inch or two over the faded paint line separating her driveway from the sidewalk, was deemed a curb obstruction. David's wife, Sophia, had left her car for an hour in a guest spot while she dropped off cookies at a friend's house, not realizing the visitor spot now had a strict 30-minute limit. The Johnsons, with their SUV, had a sliver of their bumper extending over a barely visible faded yellow line. Each infraction, no matter how minor or how long it had been an accepted norm, now carried a severe penalty. The fees were, frankly, criminal. A base tow fee of $150, a $50 administrative charge, and a $25 a day storage fee, even if you picked it up within hours. It was designed to hurt, to bleed people dry. I saw Maria later that day, her eyes red-rimmed, explaining how she had to borrow money from her sister to get her van back. It's extortion, she'd muttered, clutching her coffee cup. Pure extortion. And then came the rumor, spread not by David this time, but by Mrs. Henderson, who had an uncanny ability to know everything before anyone else. You know, I heard, she'd whisper to me over the fence, her voice low and conspiratorial, that Precision Towing Solutions is partly owned by Mr. Albright's wife. Mr. Albright was our HOA president, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes. His wife, a woman I'd only ever seen at formal HOA functions, was a quiet, almost invisible presence. The thought sent a chill down my spine. A profit-sharing scheme? It felt too sordid, too calculated. My own car, a slightly dented sedan, was usually parked precisely within the lines. I considered myself careful, rule-abiding, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Was it just a matter of time? Could I really trust the lines, the clock, the very ground my tires rested on? This wasn't just about parking anymore. This felt like a deliberate squeeze, a shakedown. And as I watched the residents of Oakwood Estates descend into a quiet panic, a new determination solidified within me. It wasn't just about getting my own car towed, or even about the community's outrage. It was about something deeper, something I'd been watching for years. This towing nightmare was just the lever I needed, the perfect chaotic catalyst for a plan I'd been forming long before any tow truck ever darkened our streets. The outrage simmered for a day, then boiled over. The Oakwood Estates Facebook group, usually a haven for lost cat alerts and recommendations for plumbers, exploded with posts. Screenshots of violation notices, tiny, blurry photos attached to digital invoices, were shared like wanted posters. Stories of financial hardship poured in, families canceling weekend plans because tow fees ate their entertainment budget, a retired couple dipping into their emergency savings. The air in our usually quiet streets crackled with a low, angry hum. "We have to do something," Maria declared, her voice HOS, when a small group of us gathered on my porch that evening. David was there, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. Mr. Jenkins, a stoic former accountant who rarely spoke above a whisper, was surprisingly vocal. Even Mrs. Henderson, usually content to just spread the news, looked ready for a fight. "They won't even answer the phones at the HOA office," David grumbled, gesturing with his phone. "I've called a dozen times. Just goes straight to voicemail, full inbox. It's almost like they're hiding," Mr. Jenkins added, adjusting his glasses. "This whole thing feels coordinated." "It is coordinated," I said, trying to keep my voice even, careful not to betray the deeper gears turning in my head. The contract with Precision Towing, the sudden, extreme rules, the fees. This wasn't accidental. And if what Mrs. Henderson heard about Albright's wife is true, then this is outright crooked. Mrs. Henderson nodded sagely. "Oh, it's true. My cousin's sister-in-law works at the county records office. She saw the incorporation papers. Half ownership, listed under a shell company. Neat and tidy, if you don't look too closely. That's when the decision was made. We would confront them, not just a few phone calls, not just angry emails. We'd demand a meeting, a public forum, where the board would have to face the community they were supposedly serving." Maria volunteered to draft a petition. David offered to help distribute flyers, and Mr. Jenkins, with his meticulous nature, started compiling a list of every single resident who had been towed, along with the associated fees. He wanted cold, hard numbers. I, meanwhile, offered to help organize, which meant I could guide the chaos, nudge it in the direction I wanted it to go, without anyone seeing my hand. The next HOA meeting was a spectacle. The community hall, usually half empty, was packed to the point of overflowing. Residents stood along the walls, spilled out into the hallway. The air was thick with frustrated whispers and the scent of stale coffee. Mr. Albright sat at the head of the long table, flanked by the other board members. Mrs. Davies, with her perpetually disapproving frown, and Mr. Chen, who always seemed to be looking anywhere but at the residents. Their smiles were gone, replaced by thin, defensive lines. Mr. Albright opened the meeting with a practiced, saccharine tone. "Good evening, esteemed residents. We understand there have been some concerns regarding the updated parking policy." "Concerns?" a woman shouted from the back. My car was towed from my own driveway. "That's not a concern. That's theft." The room erupted. People started yelling over each other, a cacophony of grievances. My daughter missed her job interview because her car was gone. $300 for parking an inch over the line. "You're bleeding us dry." "Albright." Mr. Albright held up a hand, attempting to restore order, his face tightening. Please, we are simply enforcing the rules for the safety and order of our community. We have received numerous complaints about obstructed driveways and congested visitor parking. These measures are for the greater good." "Greater good? Or greater profits?" Maria's voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear. "What about the rumors, Mr. Albright? About your wife's involvement with Precision Towing Solutions?" A hush fell. Mr. Albright's face went rigid. Mrs. Davies gasped. Mr. Chen actually flinched. The question hung in the air, a direct hit. Albright cleared his throat, his voice now devoid of any pretense of calm. "Those are baseless, slanderous accusations, and I will not dignify them with a response. This board acts with integrity, always in the best interest of Oakwood Estates." Instead of addressing our pleas, they doubled down. That's when the real twist came. Mr. Albright stood up, his jaw set. "Due to the persistent disregard for the new regulations, and in response to what appears to be a coordinated effort to undermine community order, the board has authorized further measures. Effective immediately, Precision Towing Solutions will increase their patrols to 24/7. Furthermore, we have begun installation of high-definition surveillance cameras at key parking locations throughout the neighborhood. Every alleged infraction will be photographed as verifiable evidence." A collective groan swept through the room. Surveillance cameras? More patrols? This wasn't about enforcing rules. It was about crushing dissent. And the evidence part was just a way to shut down any arguments. They were essentially creating a digital Big Brother, turning our once friendly streets into a monitored, hostile zone. "This is an invasion of privacy," someone yelled. "You're turning us against each other," another cried. But Albright held firm, his eyes scanning the room with a cold, almost triumphant gleam. "This board will not tolerate anarchy. We will ensure compliance." As the meeting dissolved into angry shouts and frustrated departures, I watched Albright. He wasn't just smug. There was something else in his gaze, a glint of something almost eager. Like he was enjoying this. That's when it clicked into place for me. The heightened tensions, the forced compliance, the sheer desperation among the residents. It was all creating the perfect storm. The anger, the fear, it was ripe for redirection. And I knew exactly who I would redirect it towards. Not just Albright, but the whole system he represented. They thought they were installing cameras to watch us? Fine. I would give them something to watch. My plan, long dormant, was finally ready to move from concept to execution. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that the true drama had only just begun. The residents thought they were fighting for their cars. They had no idea they were about to become pawns in a much larger game. The days that followed the disastrous HOA meeting felt like living under a constant, oppressive weight. The promised surveillance cameras appeared almost overnight, perched high on poles at every entrance to the neighborhood, overlooking common parking areas, and even subtly angled towards some of the main streets. They glinted in the sunlight, silent, unblinking eyes, a chilling symbol of the board's iron grip. Precision Towing Solutions trucks, once a rare sight, became a regular fixture, their black frames patrolling the streets at all hours, like vultures circling. You could almost feel the collective intake of breath from residents every time one rolled by. The air itself seemed to change, from friendly to fraught. Simple neighborhood interactions became strained. People eyed each other suspiciously, wondering if a neighbor would report them for a minor parking slip-up. Children, once playing freely, were now often called inside by anxious parents who worried about stray balls hitting a parked car and somehow leading to a tow. The sense of community, that invisible glue that held Oakwood Estates together, began to dissolve into a granular mistrust. I watched it all, an observer and, in a way, a silent conductor. My subtle efforts to organize had morphed into something more direct. I'd started holding informal gatherings on my porch, ostensibly to discuss next steps with Maria, David, and Mr. Jenkins. But beneath the surface, I was carefully planting seeds. It's not just about the money. Is it? I'd muse, stirring my iced tea. It's about control. They want to dictate every aspect of our lives, even where we put our cars. Maria, still fuming over her van, would nod vigorously. It's like they enjoy making us miserable. And the cameras, Mr. Jenkins added, pushing his glasses up his nose. They're not just for parking. They're watching us. This was the narrative I wanted to foster, that the HOA wasn't just incompetent or greedy, but actively malevolent, enjoying their power over us. I'd listened to the torrent of new towing stories, a delivery driver getting ticketed for stopping too long, a visiting nurse's car vanishing, even a family getting hit with a fee because their boat trailer was parked for an hour too long in their own driveway while they loaded it. Each story, each injustice, was fuel to the fire I was carefully stoking. One evening, a tow truck driver, a burly guy with a shaved head and tattoos snaking up his neck, got into a shouting match with old Mr. Peterson, who was trying to reason with him about his grandson's car being hitched up. The driver just pointed to the surveillance camera, scoffed, and drove off with the car. That incident ignited a new level of fury. Fistfights nearly broke out on 2 separate occasions when residents tried to block tow trucks. It was escalating quickly, just as I'd predicted. Mr. Albright, of course, remained oblivious to the growing chasm. Or perhaps he simply didn't care. His pronouncements, delivered via email, became increasingly condescending, warning residents about unacceptable levels of hostility and threatening legal action for obstruction of official HOA duties. He even announced a new Good Neighbor initiative, which was meant to foster community spirit, but felt more like a cynical joke amidst the chaos. Then came the meeting that changed everything, not for the community, but for me. I received a private email from Mr. Chen, the quietest board member, asking if I could meet him discreetly. He mentioned he had some concerns. My heart quickened. Could this be it? A crack in their facade? We met at a coffee shop outside of Oakwood Estates, a neutral territory. Mr. Chen looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and gripped the cup with both hands. "I need to talk to you," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "About Mr. Albright and precision towing." "Go on," I prompted, my mind racing. This was it. The inside man. He took a deep breath. "It's worse than you think. The ownership is more convoluted. Shell companies within shell companies. But the profits, they're staggering. And it's not just Albright's wife benefiting." He paused, his eyes darting around. "There are others. Other members of the board are getting a cut too. It's a systemic milking of the community." I feigned surprise, widening my eyes. "The whole board? Even Mrs. Davies?" He nodded grimly. "Especially Mrs. Davies. She was the one who pushed hardest for the camera installation. More evidence, more towing opportunities. She's getting a larger cut, actually." My heart hammered. This was perfect. The deeper the corruption, the more spectacular the fall. "But why are you telling me this, Mr. Chen?" I asked, putting on my most earnest, concerned face. "Isn't this risky for you?" He sighed, running a hand over his thinning hair. "Because I'm not getting a dime. They froze me out. I voted against the initial contract. Tried to warn them. They just pushed me aside. Now I'm just complicit by association. And I can't stand by and watch this anymore. My own daughter's car was almost towed last week over a stupid visitor pass expiration. They don't care who they hurt." He pushed a crumpled napkin across the table. On it, he'd scrawled a series of dates and times, and next to them, some cryptic abbreviations. "These are dates of specific financial transactions. And these," he pointed to the abbreviations, "are the names of the shell companies. You'll need to dig deep, but the trail is there. And this," he paused, his eyes meeting mine, a desperate plea in them. "This is a coded message from an old HOA server. It confirms the kickbacks. It was buried deep. I just stumbled upon it. It's the key to everything." He stood up abruptly, looking utterly drained. "I've told you what I can. The rest is up to you. Just be careful. Albright and Davies, they're ruthless." I watched him go, the crumpled napkin clutched in my hand. The coded message, the shell companies. This wasn't just about destroying the HOA anymore. It was about exposing a sophisticated web of greed. My goal, initially about a personal vendetta against a broken system, now intersected perfectly with the community's fight. They wanted their cars back. I wanted to dismantle the power structure. This was the moment I've been waiting for. The moment the fuse was lit and the bomb started ticking. But what if Mr. Chen's desperate act of defiance was merely a trap? Another layer of this twisted game. I had to find out. That crumpled napkin from Mr. Chen felt both like a lifeline and a ticking time bomb. I stared at the scribbled dates, the cryptic abbreviations, and that seemingly innocuous string of letters and numbers he called a coded message. My first instinct was a mix of exhilaration and deep suspicion. Was Chen truly a defector? Or was this a setup? A way to draw me out? To expose my own discreet tactics? I couldn't afford to be careless. My personal mission, years in the making, hinged on playing this perfectly. I started small. The abbreviations, they seemed like initials. GCC, SLD. I ran them through a quick online search, trying common business registry databases. Nothing immediately popped up, which only reinforced the idea of shell companies. They were well hidden. This wasn't some sloppy, amateur hour scam. This was professional. The coded message was next. It looked like a jumble of characters, but too structured to be random. I tried common ciphers. Caesar shifts, substitution ciphers, even some online decryptors, feeding in phrases like HOA, Albright, towing. Hours blurred into a frustrating haze, coffee cups piled up on my desk. My eyes ached. Just when I was about to give up, blaming Chen for leading me on a wild goose chase, a random thought struck me. Old HOA server, he'd said. What if it wasn't a complex cipher, but something much simpler? Something tied to their internal systems. I remembered a past HOA email, one of those infuriatingly long ones about recycling schedules, that had a string of characters at the bottom, an internal reference number. I found it in my archived emails and compared its structure to Chen's coded message. There was a similarity, a subtle pattern. It wasn't a code in the traditional sense, but an encoded file path or document ID on an old server. My heart gave a little jump. Chen hadn't given me a key. He'd given me a digital breadcrumb. The problem? I had no access to any old HOA servers. This required an inside move, a subtle digital intrusion. It was risky, but if this message truly confirmed the kickbacks, it was the smoking gun. I knew a guy, a freelance tech whiz named Leo, who operated on the fringes of ethical hacking, mostly helping small businesses recover lost data. He was expensive, discreet, and owed me a favor from a few years back when I helped him out of a sticky situation involving a very angry landlord and a mysteriously rewired apartment building. I called Leo. He sounded bored until I mentioned old HOA server and digital breadcrumbs. His interest peaked. Sounds like a digital archaeology dig, my friend, he'd said, a smirk in his voice. Could be fun. Send me what you got. No promises, but I'll see if I can even find the server, let alone get into it. A day passed, then two, filled with agonizing suspense. I kept up my role as the concerned resident, attending another small community meeting Maria organized, listening to the new towing horror stories. Mrs. Davies had reportedly called the police on a resident who was attempting to take a picture of a tow truck carrying away his car, claiming harassment. The police, predictably, sided with the HOA. The community's anger continued to simmer, but a new layer of weariness had set in. People were scared, truly scared, of what the HOA could do. Then, late one night, my phone buzzed. It was Leo. Got something for you, he texted. Meet me at the usual place, midnight. The usual place was a dimly lit, always empty booth at an all-night diner on the edge of town. When I arrived, Leo was already there, hunched over a laptop, a half-eaten plate of fries beside him. He looked up, his eyes gleaming behind his thick glasses. You were right, he whispered, pushing the laptop towards me. It was an old, forgotten server, barely protected, but that little string of yours. It led me right to it. On the screen was a fragmented document. It looked like an old spreadsheet, buried deep in a folder labeled Archive, Internal, Legacy_Files. My breath hitched. It was a ledger, not a public one, but an internal accounting of payments. Dates, amounts, and next to them, code names. Phoenix, Viper, Kraken. And then, the revealing part, payment to $X, XXX, followed by a percentage figure. And then another line, distribution to Phoenix, XX%. Phoenix, I muttered, my mind racing. Who's Phoenix? Leo shrugged. No idea. But look at this. He scrolled down, highlighting another section. There's a note here, from a few years back. Says, ensure all future distributions for Project Nightingale are routed through Phoenix Holding, LLC. Project Nightingale, Phoenix Holding, LLC. Nightingale was the codename Mr. Albright used for the Community Beautification Fund that had mysteriously vanished a few years ago, right after a major levy increase. And Phoenix Holding, that was one of the shell companies Mr. Chen had scrawled on the napkin. This wasn't just about the towing. This was deeper, more entrenched. It suggested a pattern, a history of financial misconduct. And it implicated more than just Albright and Davies. It pointed to a network. This is huge, Leo, I said, my voice barely audible. This connects everything. He nodded, serious now. Yeah, it is. But here's the thing. He closed the spreadsheet and opened a small text file. When I was digging around, I found this. It's a log file from a remote access attempt. He pointed to a line. Logged a few hours before Chen contacted you, from an IP address in this neighborhood. And the user ID. It matches Chen's internal HOA login. My blood ran cold. Chen wasn't just telling me about the corruption. He had accessed this server right before contacting me. Had he known about this deeper, older scheme all along? Was he truly trying to expose them, or was he trying to control the narrative? Perhaps even set someone else up? The desperate plea in his eyes suddenly felt like a masterclass in manipulation. And here's the clincher, Leo continued, unaware of the internal earthquake he just caused. This server log shows that another access was made, just last night. While I was in it, someone else was trying to get in. Someone who tried to erase the logs. They didn't succeed, but they were close. And they knew exactly where to look. My eyes darted to the window of the diner, peering into the dark, empty parking lot. Someone else knew about this server. Someone else was trying to cover their tracks, or maybe even retrieve something vital. Was it Albright, Davies, or was it Chen himself, double-crossing me, trying to erase his own tracks after giving me the lead? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I had just walked into a trap, or at the very least, into a much more dangerous game than I had anticipated. The stakes had just multiplied, and I was now caught between ruthless board members, a potential traitor, and an unknown third party. My plan for dismantling the HOA had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more perilous. I left Leo at the diner, the chill of the early morning air doing little to cool the fire raging in my mind. The napkin, the spreadsheet, the server logs. It was all here. The evidence of decades of corruption, meticulously documented in hidden files, not just the towing scheme. And the user ID matching Chen's login, the second access attempt. It spun in my head like a malfunctioning rotor. Chen was a wild card, potentially a deep operative, not just a disgruntled board member. And the unknown entity attempting to erase tracks? That meant I was not alone in this digital hunt, and the hunter might now be the hunted. The immediate challenge was what to do with this information. If I just dumped it on Maria and David, they'd be overwhelmed, probably scared, and might not grasp the full implications. This wasn't just about parking fees anymore. It was about years of systematic embezzlement, about a web of shell companies and code names like Phoenix and Viper that hinted at a much larger criminal enterprise operating right under our noses, disguised as a neighborhood association. And how could I explain Leo's involvement without giving away my own deeper, long-held vendetta against the entire concept of HOA control, a vendetta that predated any parking dispute? I spent the next few days in a state of high alert, my senses sharpened. Every black tow truck that passed my house felt like a personal threat. Every shadow in the evening seemed to hold a hidden observer. I cleaned out my car, making sure not a single atom of dust crossed the parking line, double-checking the guest spot rules even when I had no guests. Paranoia was a useful tool. It kept me sharp. I decided to involve Maria and Mr. Jenkins first, leaving out Leo and Chen's suspicious digital footprints for now. I arranged a meeting at Mr. Jenkins' house, away from any known camera blind spots. His methodical mind, I reasoned, would be best suited to digest the financial data. "Look at this," I said, sliding the printed spreadsheet snippets across his polished coffee table. "This is from an old HOA server, internal ledger." Mr. Jenkins put on his reading glasses, his brow furrowing as he scanned the columns. Maria leaned in, her eyes wide with curiosity. As he read, his face slowly turned from curious to incredulous, then to a steely, quiet rage. "Project Nightingale," he murmured, pointing to a line. "That was the community park renovation fund they raised a few years ago. Said it all went to costs, went over budget. It's here, paid out to Phoenix Holding, LLC, with a distribution to something called Phoenix, listed right beside it." He looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "This isn't just kickbacks from towing. This goes back years. This is grand larceny. These funds were never for the park. They were laundered." Maria gasped, covering her mouth. "Years? They've been stealing from us for years?" I nodded grimly. "And the towing? That's just the latest, most obvious way to squeeze the community, while funneling more money through their private company. It's an open-air ATM for them." The plan solidified. We would organize another community meeting. But this time, it wouldn't be a protest. It would be an ambush. We wouldn't just present grievances, we would present undeniable evidence. Mr. Jenkins would compile a concise, irrefutable report based on the data, translating the cryptic ledger into plain, damning language. Maria would rally the community, urging everyone to attend, framing it as a final chance for transparency. I would prepare a presentation, a visual representation of their financial network, connecting Albright and Davies to the shell companies and the missing funds. The day of the meeting arrived, thick with tension. The community hall was even more packed than before. Mr. Albright, Mrs. Davies, and Mr. Chen sat at the table, looking smug, ready for another round of dismissals. They seemed to think this was just another angry resident meeting, another opportunity to double down. They had no idea the trap was closing. Mr. Albright began his usual preamble about community guidelines, but Mr. Jenkins cut him off, striding to the front with a projector. "Mr. Albright," he stated, his voice ringing with a newfound authority, "we're not here to discuss parking lines. We're here to discuss where our money has truly been going." As the first slide appeared on the screen, a magnified image of the Project Nightingale ledger entry, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Albright's face went pale. Mrs. Davies stiffened. Mr. Chen stared at the table, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. "For years," Mr. Jenkins continued, his voice rising, "funds collected from every one of you for community improvements, maintenance, and security have been systematically siphoned off, funneled through a series of shell corporations, and deposited into accounts directly benefiting certain individuals on this board." He clicked to the next slide, a simplified diagram of the money flow, linking Oakwood Estates HOA directly to Phoenix Holding, LLC, and then to accounts under names that weren't Albright or Davies, but suspiciously similar surnames belonging to close relatives. The crowd erupted into shouts. "This is outrageous," Mr. Albright finally managed, his face red with fury. "These are fabrications, hacked documents. We will sue you for slander." But I stepped forward then, taking the microphone. "Not fabrications, Mr. Albright, just facts. And we have more." I clicked to a new slide, a magnified section of the server log Leo had found. "This is a record of your own board member, Mr. Chen, accessing this very server just hours before he approached us with this information. He was trying to cover his tracks, trying to erase his own involvement after being cut out of the profits." The room plunged into stunned silence. All eyes turned to Mr. Chen, who finally looked up, his face ashen, betraying him completely. He had been so careful, so desperate to appear as the victim. "And for those who doubt," I continued, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding, "there was another attempt to access and erase these logs just last night. Someone else is involved, someone who knows the system, someone who wanted this evidence gone." My eyes swept across the room, past the board members, past the angry residents, to a figure lurking by the back door, half hidden in the shadows. A man I'd seen before, a man who frequented the same coffee shop as Mr. Chen, always alone. He moved quickly, slipping out of the hall before anyone else could notice. It wasn't Albright, it wasn't Davies, it wasn't Chen. It was someone else entirely. The meeting dissolved into utter chaos. Residents surged forward, demanding arrests, demanding resignations. The current board members were trapped, their faces contorted with fear and disbelief. Maria was leading chants to disband the HOA entirely. Mr. Jenkins was calmly handing out copies of his report to people eager to call the authorities. The HOA was finished. Its leaders, exposed and humiliated, were overwhelmed by the fury of the community. They had built their empire on fear and deceit, and it had crumbled spectacularly. But as I watched the pandemonium, a strange satisfaction settled over me. It wasn't just about their fall. It was about the system, the inherent power imbalance that allowed such corruption to flourish. My personal vendetta wasn't just against Albright. It was against the very idea of a governing body that could so easily exploit its constituents. The Oakwood Estates HOA was destroyed, its remnants scattered by the storm. But the real game, for me, was just beginning. The fight against arbitrary power, against the invisible hands that truly pulled the strings, was far from over. And as the police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, I slipped out a side door, leaving the chaos behind, the true architect of their downfall disappearing into the night, ready for the next battle, wherever it might emerge. Seriously, this HOA is pure scum. The whole parking violations thing was obviously just a thinly veiled excuse to fleece residents and funnel cash into Albright's pockets. $300 for an inch over the line? That's not enforcement. That's organized crime with a fancy HOA label. And the daily storage fees? Just another way to bleed people dry for a few more days if they can't cough up the cash immediately. It's disgusting how these tiny dictatorships abuse their power. They probably sat around in their fancy little meetings laughing about how much they were raking in while Maria was crying about borrowing money for her van. This isn't about community standards. It's about criminal enterprise. Absolutely infuriating to read because it feels so real. Okay, gotta say, the OP is way more interesting than just some angry homeowner. They were playing a long game, manipulating the chaos, subtly guiding the outrage. The personal vendetta against the entire concept of HOA control part. That's the real story. This wasn't just about justice for parking. It was a calculated takedown. While I'm glad the HOA got what they deserved for their blatant corruption. Seriously, using Project Nightingale to launder funds for years? That's next level evil. The protagonist methods are pretty ruthless. They used Maria and Mr. Jenkins as pawns. And Chen too. Makes you wonder what other battles they've fought, and what else they're planning. A true puppet master. Respect the grind, but also kind of scary. Chen, you absolute snake. Coming forward, discreetly, when you got cut out of the profits. Trying to race your own tracks? That's not a whistleblower. That's a rat trying to save his own skin after the ship started sinking. And the rest of the board, Albright and Davies, those greedy bastards just kept pushing, convinced they were untouchable. It's always the quiet ones, isn't it? Chen's sudden conscience, when his own family got hit by the towing, just proves how self-serving this whole operation was. The fact that they were hitting their own kind, and still didn't care until it hit their personal pocket or family, highlights the depravity. They deserved everything they got, and Chen should be right there with them in the legal fallout.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.